By the time you're watching this, it's probably May the 4th, so, of course, May the 4th be with you. And what better day than this to take a deep dive into space? We've got a lot to unpack, so strap in for another wave of deep space updates. Over the past few weeks, space launches have been happening back-to-back at an incredible pace, and the news just keeps pouring in. Let's roll back to April 18th, when China launched its Long March 6A rocket, sending multiple satellites into orbit. Specifically, satellites labeled Machine 27A through 27F, which are part of a technology demonstrator series. These satellites were launched into sun-synchronous orbit, reaching an altitude of about 1,000 kilometers with an orbital inclination of 99.7 degrees. What exactly they're testing up there is still not entirely clear, but it's believed to be related to China's defense and military technological advancements. These launches are part of a broader push by China to expand its satellite presence and capabilities in Earth's orbit, using these platforms to test experimental tech that could shape future missions or defense systems. And that was just the beginning of a truly action-packed few days in spaceflight. Just a day later, on April 19th, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base. This mission was part of the Starshield program, with a payload consisting of U.S. government satellites labeled USA 523 through 544. These were placed into sun-synchronous orbit, and the mission was executed for the National Reconnaissance Office, which handles America's most classified space surveillance projects. While details remain scarce due to the sensitive nature of the mission, the launch highlights how frequently national security and private spaceflight are intersecting in today's space race. Moving on to April 21st, another Falcon 9 lifted off, this time from Launch Complex 39A, delivering the CRS-32 cargo mission to the International Space Station. What stood out with this mission was the shift in cargo priorities. Normally, a ton of scientific instruments and research material is included, but this time around only about 255 kilograms of science made it aboard. Instead, the bulk of the cargo, over 1.5 tons, was consumables for astronauts, largely because of recent complications with the Cygnus spacecraft from Northrop Grumman. Despite the science payload being lighter, there were still some fascinating experiments on board. Among those was the European Space Agency's atomic clock experiment, known as the Atomic Clock Ensemble in space. It includes two incredibly precise atomic clocks, one developed by NIS called Faro and another by Safran, the SHM. Together, they're designed to test elements of general relativity and improve precision timekeeping in space. Also in the cargo was Houston 10's suite of experiments as part of the Space Test Program. These kinds of missions are critical in maintaining both the functionality and scientific output of the ISS, especially when other resupply missions run into trouble. Fast forward to April 22nd, and yet another Falcon 9 launch, this one from SLC-40, carried the Bandwagon 3 rideshare mission. Think of it as the low-inclination counterpart to SpaceX's transporter missions. Bandwagon 3 mainly served customers from South Korea, who launched a few of their own satellites, along with some smaller payloads. This time, only 3 satellites were on board: CoreSat, Phoenix 1 and Tomorrow, R7. What drew the most interest was Phoenix 1, a German-built spacecraft by the startup Atmos, designed as a re-entry vehicle with an inflatable heat shield. Phoenix 1's mission was to test atmospheric re-entry technology. The spacecraft was originally supposed to re-enter over the Pacific Ocean and be recovered, but due to orbit changes required by SpaceX's primary customers, that plan had to be altered. Instead, the company redirected tracking stations to Brazil, where they managed to collect some of the re-entry data. Though they didn't recover the spacecraft, Atmos still considers the test a partial success, a good sign for future missions involving inflatable heat shields, which could revolutionize how spacecraft survive the intense heat of atmospheric entry. Then came April 24th, when China's Long March 2F/G launched the Shenzhou A-Team mission, sending 3 astronauts, often called takenauts, to their Tiangong space station. The crew included Yi Guangfu on his 3rd spaceflight, along with rookies Li Tsong and Li Guangsu. Just 6.5 hours after launch, they successfully docked with the space station. Among their cargo were some interesting biological experiments, including zebrafish and flatworms called planarians, to study everything from regenerative biology to antibiotic production in space. The zebrafish setup, for example, will simulate a tiny ecosystem to examine how life behaves in microgravity. On April 25th, SpaceX conducted another Starlink mission from SLC-40, this one labeled Group 6 to 74. Just 2 days later, on April 27th, China launched a Long March 3B/E carrying Tianlian-2 into a geostationary transfer orbit. This satellite is part of China's data relay network, equivalent to NASA's TDRSS system, which provides communication links for spacecraft even when they're out of direct contact with ground stations. These data relay systems are vital for real-time communications with space assets, particularly during critical phases like docking, re-entry, or deep space operations. On April 28, yet another Falcon 9 launched from SLC-40 carrying Group 12 to 23 of the Starlink satellites. That same day, China launched a Long March 5B equipped with the YZ-2 upper stage. This launch deployed 10 satellites for the Hulinwang constellation, part of the broader Guowang project, which aims to place over 13,000 satellites into orbit, a scale comparable to or even exceeding SpaceX's Starlink. If successful, this would make it one of the most ambitious satellite internet constellations ever attempted, but it will take a vast number of launches to complete. Also on April 28, SpaceX's oldest booster, B-1063, launched for its 25th time from Vandenberg, carrying Group 11 to 9 of the Starlink fleet. First flown in 2020, this booster has proven remarkably resilient. It's not the most flown booster, that title belongs to others, but it's the oldest currently in operation, a testament to how SpaceX's reusability model continues to redefine what's possible in launch vehicle longevity and cost efficiency. Every time these older boosters go up, they push the boundary of what's considered wear and tear in rocket science. Later that day, United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket launched 27 satellites for Amazon's Kuiper project, the company's answer to Starlink. This was the heaviest Atlas V payload ever launched, flying in the 551 configuration with 5 solid rocket boosters. Despite the heavy payload, the rocket lifted off the pad with surprising speed thanks to all that extra thrust. While the live stream ended early, sparking some curiosity, we did later get confirmation that the 34,000-pound payload successfully deployed. That means each Kuiper satellite weighs around 525 to 550 kilograms, very similar to Starlink's V2 models. On April 29, another Falcon 9 lifted off from Launch Complex 39A, deploying 23 more Starlink satellites as part of Group 12 to 10. While not particularly notable on its own, it did mark the debut of a brand new booster, B-1094, continuing SpaceX's rapid pace of manufacturing and reusability. That same day, Europe launched its Vega C rocket carrying the biomass satellite for the European Space Agency. This Earth Explorer mission is unique because it's using the P-band frequency radar, never before used in space-based synthetic aperture radar, to map global forests by penetrating tree canopies and measuring actual wood mass. The Vega C's success was followed by a launch from Firefly Aerospace, which sent their Alpha rocket up on its 6th mission carrying Lockheed Martin's experimental satellite. Unfortunately, there was a problem during stage separation. While details are still emerging, the FAA has classified it as a mishap, and Firefly is now investigating. It's a setback for the company, but Lockheed has several more missions lined up with Firefly, so resolving this issue quickly is a priority. Finally, on May 2nd, yet another Falcon 9 launched Starlink Group 6 to 82 from SLC-40, closing out a relentless schedule of launches in just 2 weeks. Back on Earth, after celebrating his birthday with a cake, one astronaut apparently had a rather rough landing. Quite literally. He ended up vomiting on the steppes in Kazakhstan. Now, while that might sound alarming, it's actually not that uncommon for astronauts returning from a 6-month mission in space. The body takes time to readjust to gravity. He did look a little pale, a bit shaken, but just a few days later he bounced back impressively and held a press conference. At 70 years old, he confidently stated that retirement was not in his immediate plans and he's not done yet. He even made a reference to John Glenn, who famously flew at the age of 76. With a chuckle he said, "I'm only 70. I think I've got a few more good years left in me." That wasn't just talk either. He mentioned being open to flying again, maybe another mission or two before finally deciding to hang up his rocket nozzles. His son, clearly proud, shared on Twitter that the Dawn mission had collected an astounding 33 terabytes of imagery. They're looking for help from skilled image processors to help catalog, enhance, and showcase the stunning visuals captured in orbit. So if image processing or deep space photography is your area of interest, this could be a unique chance to contribute. Meanwhile, over in China, the Shenzhou 19 crew safely returned to Earth. The astronauts, Kaizhe Song Lingdong and Wang Hu, wrapped up a 6-month mission. They had launched on October 29, 2024, and landed on April 30, 2025. That's half a year in space. Kai, in particular, may now hold the record for the most cumulative time spent in space by a Chinese astronaut, although there's some debate about the numbers. What is confirmed, however, is that Kai now holds the joint record for the longest extravehicular activity, or EVA, in Chinese space history. During a spacewalk with Song Ling-dong, they installed debris shielding, carried out inspections, and did maintenance tasks. Things didn't go entirely to plan. Some technical glitches extended the mission. In the end, their EVA lasted a record-breaking 9 hours and 6 minutes. They've since returned to Earth, while the new Shenzhou Crew 20 has taken their place aboard the Chinese space station, continuing operations and conducting their own research and activities up there. And speaking of spacewalks, there was a notable one on the International Space Station recently. Astronauts Tracy Caldwell Dyson and Nicole Mann carried out a crucial EVA to lay the groundwork for the installation of another IROSA solar panel. This included routing power cables around the station's exterior, prepping everything for future upgrades. It's all part of an ongoing effort to improve the station's power infrastructure, making it more efficient and capable for future missions. These EVAs are always risky and complex, but they're absolutely vital for the long-term sustainability of operations aboard the station. Now on April 20th, there was an exciting moment in the ongoing Lucy mission. The spacecraft made a close flyby of the asteroid Donald Johanson, a carbon-rich C-type asteroid. It was the second asteroid Lucy has visited on its journey toward the Jupiter Trojans. The spacecraft passed within 600 miles of the asteroid's surface and already started sending back images. There's still much more data to come. The asteroid's appearance is intriguing. It appears slightly WASP-wasted, hinting it might be a contact binary, essentially two objects fused together over time. What's particularly interesting is the asteroid's name. Back in 2015, during mission planning, NASA realized they could include this asteroid in their trajectory. They took a leap of faith and named it Donald Johanson, after the paleoanthropologist who discovered the Lucy fossil. It was a risk, since any delay in launch could have meant missing this target completely. But everything worked out and the spacecraft met its mark perfectly. It's another example of how space missions blend science, precision, and a bit of bold thinking to achieve their goals. Meanwhile, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, is entering the lunar scene with a rather intriguing plan. They've put out a solicitation for a new mission, the Lunar Assay via Small Satellite Orbiter. This mission will involve sending a small satellite to orbit the Moon at extremely low altitudes, as low as 10 kilometers. The satellite will carry instruments designed to detect water on the Moon's surface and also serve as a testbed for advanced propulsion and navigation systems. Unlike NASA missions, this one is fully backed by the U.S. Department of Defense. That fact alone signals growing strategic interest in cislunar space, the area between Earth and the Moon. While DARPA is known for testing cutting-edge technology, this also reflects how seriously the U.S. military is now considering future operations around the Moon. China has already shown steady progress in this domain through its Chang'e lunar program. Chang'e 5, for instance, successfully brought back 1.73 kilograms of lunar samples from the Oceanus Procellarum region. That sample has been under study in China since 2020, but now it's going global. China has just announced it will loan out portions of this lunar material to universities outside its borders. This marks a major shift towards scientific cooperation. Two American institutions, Brown University and Stony Brook University, are among the recipients. This kind of collaboration is rare, especially between the US and China in space exploration. Along with the US, countries like Japan, Germany, France, the UK, and even Pakistan are slated to receive samples for scientific research. These studies may unlock new insights into the Moon's geological history and how it formed. Turning back to NASA, the Psyche mission, designed to explore the metallic asteroid Psyche, has hit a snag. The spacecraft uses Hall-effect thrusters powered by xenon gas, but recently the system detected a drop in pressure from 36 psi to 26 psi. This pressure is critical for delivering xenon to the thrusters. As a result, the engines temporarily shut down. While they're still within safety margins, engineers are now racing against time. If they can't restart the engines by June, they may miss a crucial Mars gravity assist needed to slingshot Psyche toward its target. Xenon, being a noble gas, is highly stable and inert. So corrosion or chemical contamination is highly unlikely. The most probable issue lies with a faulty pressure regulator or a malfunction in the fuel delivery hardware. The good news is that the system was designed with redundancy. There are multiple parallel paths for fuel delivery. NASA may opt to switch to a backup pathway while continuing to diagnose the main problem. But if they can't resolve the issue in time, the mission trajectory will need to be reworked significantly, or possibly even delayed. Meanwhile, over at SpaceX, there's been more testing on the next Starship slated for flight, Ship 35. They performed 2 separate static fire tests. The first was a short-duration burn using a single engine. This mimicked the kind of burn they'd need for deorbiting Starship from space, a maneuver they've tried on previous test flights but haven't yet nailed down successfully. This time, they finally demonstrated that short burn under controlled conditions. It's a key step toward validating Starship's ability to safely return from orbit and perform controlled descents in future missions. Later that day, SpaceX followed up with a longer 6-engine static fire. This one lasted 30 seconds and caught a lot of attention. Toward the end of the burn, viewers noticed a change in the color and behavior of the exhaust. There was a sudden flash and an apparent increase in flame intensity, leading to speculation about potential debris or anomalies. While nothing was officially confirmed, many suspect this test may have exposed issues similar to those that led to the failures of Flights 7 and 8. SpaceX is now digging deep to identify exactly what happened and how to fix it. Prematurely, we still don't know if they truly succeeded in whatever final goal they had in mind, or if this was simply an intriguing and unexpected conclusion to the mission. There's a chance this whole thing might just be a coincidence with no deeper purpose or outcome. Regardless, the spacecraft is now on its way back to Starbase. Interestingly, just a few hours ago, the residents of Starbase made a surprising move. They voted overwhelmingly in favor of incorporating Starbase into an official, legal city. What this means for local governance or how it impacts space operations remains to be seen. The legal incorporation of Starbase as a city opens up a lot of questions about future infrastructure, zoning laws, and political responsibilities in an area that has so far operated in a very untraditional way. For a place that has grown up around innovation and experimentation, turning into a city could bring both new opportunities and bureaucratic hurdles. It's too early to tell how this change will affect Elon Musk's operations or the community around SpaceX's facilities, but it certainly adds a new dynamic to an already unique location that's become central to private spaceflight. And speaking of politics, yes, we're diving into that tangled web now. Let's talk about Jared Isaacman. First, some good news for him. Jared recently received a strong vote of confidence from the Senate Commerce Committee, with a vote of 19-2 in favor of advancing his nomination. That's a big step forward. Even Senator Ted Cruz gave his approval, basically saying, "Sure, you're still going to the moon and you support the SLS, so I'll support you." Senator Maria Cantwell echoed a similar sentiment, so things looked pretty smooth, at least on the surface. But the 2 no votes came from Democrats, and while it's entirely possible they personally like Jared, politics often isn't that simple. These senators might need to show resistance toward anything that looks like it supports the Trump administration, especially as election seasons ramp up. It's not always about the individual, it's about optics, voter expectations, and making public stances. Jared himself seems like a genuinely likable guy, so it's probably not personal. Still, when politics mixes with space exploration, the outcomes are rarely straightforward and often driven by narratives beyond the actual mission. But now let's shift to the biggest headline: NASA's budget for 2026. We knew it was going to be tough, but few expected just how brutal this budget proposal would be. The White House's Office of Management and Budget released its top-line federal budget request on May 2nd, and what they're asking for NASA is historic, unfortunately in the worst possible way. The proposal calls for just $18.8 billion for NASA in 2026, which represents a staggering 25% cut from the $24.9 billion approved for 2025. And 2025's budget was already a cut from the year before. To put that into perspective, this would be the single largest funding cut in NASA's history. It's not just about numbers, it's about the ripple effects across every single mission, department, and future plan the agency has been working toward. Already, signs of belt tightening are showing. For example, NASA was set to announce a new opportunity for a small Explorer-class science mission. That's been scrapped entirely and pushed to at least 2026, but even then, it's highly unlikely there will be funds available. So in practical terms, it's not a delay, it's a quiet cancellation. Even more concerning is what's happening with the Goddard Institute for Space Studies. This center has played a vital role in NASA's research operations since the 1960s. Based at Columbia University in New York, the institute leveraged its proximity to a major academic center to conduct joint scientific work. Now, the lease on that office space has been canceled, with no new location announced. Technically, the institute still exists on paper, but with no physical office, its operations are effectively frozen. This move symbolizes how deeply the cuts are impacting long-standing institutions within NASA's framework. The budget's impacts are widespread and severe. Missions like the Mars Sample Return, once considered cornerstone projects, are being cancelled. Climate science and weather satellites, which provide critical data for Earth monitoring, are being scaled back or eliminated. For instance, the Landsat program has been decoped, and many experimental technologies like new propulsion systems and advanced life support systems have seen budget slashes by 50%. The International Space Station wasn't spared either, losing $500 million from its support funding. That means fewer crew rotations, reduced science experiments, and scaled-back maintenance and upgrades aboard the station. Even projects like green aviation, NASA's push to help make air travel more energy efficient, are being dropped. This area was of real interest to airlines, hoping for future aircraft with lower emissions and better fuel economy. But now NASA won't be offering help in that area. The education budget is also gone, which means fewer outreach programs, internships, and opportunities for the next generation of engineers and scientists. For a country that's been a global leader in aerospace innovation, these cuts send a strong, sobering message about where space science currently sits on the list of national priorities. However, the one thing that has a certain corner of the space community cheering, or at least sighing in bittersweet relief, is the news about the Space Launch System. According to the proposed budget, the SLS will fly just 3 more missions. After Artemis 3, it's likely to be retired. That also means the Orion capsule program may be winding down unless new funding is approved. The Lunar Gateway, once hailed as a next-generation outpost around the Moon, is now considered surplus. Some of its hardware might be reused elsewhere, but the original plans are probably scrapped. Now, the Gateway's power and propulsion element as well as the habitation module were already well into construction, so there's a chance NASA will repurpose these for another space station, maybe one not bound to lunar orbit. This isn't the end of space infrastructure building, but it's definitely a shift. Everything depends now on whether NASA's leadership can reorganize, negotiate with Congress, and forge a path forward with whatever resources they're given. But given the current political climate, there's not much optimism that Congress will rush to restore funds or revive shelved projects anytime soon. And of course, there will be lots of people online and on the news blaming Trump for destroying NASA's deep space goals, but let's be honest, this is a bipartisan tradition. Back in the Obama era, the Constellation program was canceled, and then Congress stepped in to create SLS. These shifts aren't new. The truth is, space programs have always been political chess pieces, and it's Congress, not the White House alone, that holds the purse strings. So while the administration's proposal is severe, it's not the final word. Still, the writing on the wall is hard to ignore. And that brings us back to a core truth. Space news shouldn't be this predictable. Unfortunately, though, it is. If you've been following US politics for the past few years, then you probably saw this kind of budget cut coming a mile away. So if today's news feels shocking, well, that just means you haven't been paying close enough attention. These funding cliffs, delays, and sudden cancellations, none of it is surprising anymore. It's disappointing, sure, but it's no longer unexpected. Anyway, let's lighten the mood a bit and move on to something more inspiring and grassroots. Here's something cool from the world of amateur rocketry. A viewer reached out and asked if their project could be featured, and the answer was an easy yes. I absolutely love stories like this. The project is called Mari, and it's based in New Zealand. This team recently achieved something remarkable. They flew a small amateur-built rocket above the Kármán line, officially reaching space. Even more impressively, this is the first amateur rocket to do so from the southern hemisphere. And with a top speed of Mach 5.64, it now holds the record for the fastest amateur hypersonic flight ever. The rocket itself was incredibly lightweight, just around 45 kilograms. It used a 2-stage design, and although their earlier attempts had scrubs and ignition failures, they didn't give up. On this attempt, the rocket successfully reached an apogee of nearly 398,000 feet. That's way above the 100-kilometer threshold that defines the edge of space. During the second stage, the rocket started off stable but then entered a pancaking spin, rotating sideways along its long axis. As one of the team members joked, quoting Frank Sinatra, "It did it sideways." A hilarious and honest description of what was still a fantastic success. What this proves is simple but powerful. You don't need billions of dollars or a giant government agency to reach space. You need dedication, curiosity, technical know-how, and a willingness to fail, learn, and try again. Amateur rocketry is one of the most inspiring parts of the aerospace world because it's driven purely by passion. So if you're dreaming about going to space or contributing to the field, don't let lack of experience hold you back. You can always learn, build something, work with others. That's how things actually get done, one step at a time. Looking ahead, there's more excitement on the horizon. iSpace recently completed the final burn of its deep space campaign. You might remember they launched aboard Firefly's Blue Ghost mission on a Falcon 9 rocket back on January 15. While Firefly's mission went straight to the moon and successfully landed, iSpace chose a longer, low-energy trajectory via Lagrange points, making several complex maneuvers along the way. Now they're finally on approach to the moon and are expected to enter lunar orbit on May 7. From there, the team will lower their orbit and attempt a landing. Hopefully, this time they'll stick the landing without being confused